In the past, it was a staple of kidnappings for the hostage to hold up a newspaper to prove that they're still alive. The problem with me is that I started reading the newspapers I was holding up, although I'm still, as you can judge by our social media overlords, in captivity. Nevertheless, I'll try my best to get what news I can out to you given the constraints. First up, stories on the domestic news front that I'm tracking. In a bid to help the regime in an election year, the Bureau for Economic Analysis is claiming that U.S. GDP has surprised everyone and gone up an astounding 3.3%. This is comparable to other classic examples of statistical manipulation in the past, such as when we stopped counting people who ceased looking for jobs in the unemployment category, or when under George W. Bush they redefined hamburger restaurants as manufacturing companies to boost flagging numbers in the industrial sector. Nevertheless, as Breitbart reports, the economy grew at a much faster rate than expected in the final months of 2023, the Bureau for Economic Analysis said Thursday, boosted by robust consumer spending and ballooning government budgets. Gross domestic product, the government's broadest scorecard for the economy, rose at an inflation-adjusted 3.3% annual pace in the fourth quarter. Economists had been expecting the economy to grow at a 2% pace in the October through December period. Even the most bullish forecasts saw just 2.5% growth in the fourth quarter. Because of these inflated claims, the government is happy to continue spending at an unprecedented rate, as Representative Chip Roy complains about here.
Spent a lot of time with people not in Texas over the last week. Every single one of them, New Hampshire, Iowa, airports, South Carolina, pit stopped in South Carolina the day before yesterday. Every single one of them are beside themselves at the rote incompetence and absurdity that is this body. All of us. Every stinking last one of us. Every single person I talk to cannot understand how a body that is supposed to be representative of the people comes here and manages to make this country worse on a daily basis, no matter who's in the majority. I defy anybody to prove me otherwise. $34 trillion of debt, and we have my Democratic colleagues saying we can't even have a conversation about Social Security, Medicare, and we have ATR and a bunch of people flipping out on our side saying you can't even have a conversation about taxes. What in the utter hell is wrong with this body? It is just mind-blowing. If you believe in modern monetary theory, then put your money where your mouth is and just get rid of taxes. Why should we have a single dollar of taxation if you believe in modern monetary theory? Just spend our children's inheritance. Do you watch the debt clock and have even a pang of guilt at your own incompetence? And I'm looking at every member of the body, both sides of the aisle, and I'm looking in the mirror. We can't even cut discretionary spending. We can't even cut bureaucrats and programs that have very little discernible value to the American citizens, and we think we're going to have a serious conversation about Social Security and Medicare? It's laughable. It is absolutely laughable, and it's an embarrassment to come back and sit here in a committee where we have colleagues shutting down any chance of bipartisan efforts to put everything on the table and do our damn job. Meanwhile, the American people are the people left holding the bag.
Roy's referring to a phenomenon that reminds me of something that Napoleon said. When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. A viewer of mine made a really good point, not to confuse economics with chrematistics. Economics derives from the Greek terms for how property is administered, when you're running an estate. Chrematistics, by contrast, is sheer wealth accumulation, according to Aristotle, and it has nothing to do with wisely administering a state. What we're watching here take place right now is people who are claiming to be operating on behalf of the economy, i.e., administering the state wisely, and they're actually just looting the place for personal private gain. They're profiteering. They're pirates, economic pirates. Although we should call them crematistic pirates. And so anyway, so Adam Smith warned about this in The Wealth of Nations in 1776, one of our foundational economics books. And he said at the end of chapter 11 that there were three types of ways to make money in the economy. And he said two of these types, they align with the state of the country, right? So as the country does better, they do better. As the country does worse, they do worse. And one of those were people who earn their money through wages, right? So as the country does better, their wages go up, they do better. The other is real estate development. People who have an interest in the land want the country to do better because they want their real estate values to go higher. He warns that there's a third group, however, and this third group is essentially international finance, mercantilism. He says that this third group makes money as the country declines. They loot the place. It's like a hedge fund, like Mitt Romney's hedge fund that basically, did outsourcing, and they profiteered off of dismantling companies, destroying things, not building things. By the way, one of the people who pioneered that technique was Jay Gould back in the 19th century. He was one of the first people to make money not by building a company, but by tearing it apart and selling it for its parts. And so Adam Smith warned about that we should never allow this third group of financiers and mercantilists to take over the government. And if they did, you would see the natural consequences. One of the people who kind of went along with that early on in our republic was Alexander Hamilton. And he was one of the Federalists. He got in the Constitution, and by that means, he wanted to install kind of a system that was similar to that in England, with a king and a central bank ruling things. And initially, under the Articles of Confederation, we didn't have a monarchical figure. We didn't have a president. And so they wanted to re-engineer the government and create this system that we still had our republic underneath, but over top of it would be grafted this federal system. And Hamilton enacted something called the Central Bank of the United States, which was not in our Constitution. They had no constitutional power to create a central bank, but they did, and it was 80% of its stock was owned by the Bank of England, and by that means the bankers got control of our government. They hijacked it. They short-circuited the people, and it kind of goes back to what Napoleon was talking about, that whoever is paying out the silver is the master, as an Arab proverb goes. And so if the people are paying for the government, then the people are, through their taxes, and then the people are in charge effectively. They're the masters of the society. By having a central bank, the government doesn't have to rely on the people's taxes. It bypasses them and takes out loans from the central bank, going into debt. And it's very bad for the country, obviously, but it's great for those central bankers, and it's great for the politicians getting the kickbacks. And unfortunately, this leads to some dangerous, choppy territory, as Chip Roy was referring to, and this leads us into international news. Zero Hedge has an article entitled Doomsday Clock Update. The globalists keep warning us that emergency is imminent. On the heels of the World Economic Forum meeting of the globalist power players, where we're treated to news of possible pandemic with a fatality rate 20 times that of COVID-19, the globalists are giving us a fresh warning. The Doomsday Clock, first created in 1947 as a way to gauge global threats such as nuclear war, pandemics, and emerging technologies, gave its yearly update. This year, the Doomsday Clock is 90 seconds from midnight, marking the closest it's ever been to global destruction. They mentioned that the Doomsday Clock was inaugurated in 1947. There were some other things inaugurated in 1947. For instance, the International Monetary Fund, or the UFO phenomenon with Roswell having taken place in 1947. Most significantly of all in 1947 was the inauguration of the Central Intelligence Agency. And it's probably no coincidence that the Doomsday Clock and the Central Intelligence Agency kind of emerged at the same time, because this was a new governance model. Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, talks about that in his 1926 book, Crystallizing Public Opinion. He says, for the first time, we have, through propaganda, a new governance model that is distinct from the ones that Aristotle talked about in classical political science. Aristotle describes monarchy, aristocracy, and republic, right? And these degrade and decay into, monarchy degrades into tyranny, aristocracy into oligarchy, and republic into democracy, mob rule. And so Edward Bernays was saying, hey, because of propaganda, because of communications, we have a new governance model. We can mobilize public opinion in a way that they couldn't in the past. This is a point, by the way, also made by Duncan Bell in his book, Dream Worlds of Race. And he talks about how the telegraph was instrumental in kind of creating larger political institutions, larger polities than could have been conceived in the past, because it's kind of like the neurological system of the society. Think of the political state, like the body politic, as Plato had it in the Republic, right? He conceptualized the government as a body, with the intellectual class as the head, the spirit of the body, the heart were the soldiers and the police, and the appetitive part, the gut and sex organs were the artisans, the farmers, people who saw to kind of, our sensory and physiological, maintenance. And so he saw it as a big person. So conceptualize it as a big person with a neurological system now. And so Duncan Bell was talking about how England and the United States were separated by geography, right? And that at the time, that was an insurmountable barrier until the discovery of of electricity and the telegraph, linking the two countries through a transatlantic cable. And all of a sudden, these dreams that the English had of reabsorbing the United States came to fruition, right? They thought that, hey, by treaties, like in the 1870s, the Fabian Socialists talked about that. How can we reabsorb the United States? And they said we would do it through treaties. And we got that with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization right around the time the CIA comes into existence. And so they had this, rule by propaganda, rule by fear, rule by terror, affecting political change by instigating panics and stuff like that. So just be very mindful of these weird things that you're going to be seeing in the news. All propaganda is not true. All that glitters is not gold. And this takes us into our new segment, News of the Weird. Now that we're living in a new post-1947 world that's the creation of the CIA's rule by propaganda model, it's interesting to see how other programs from the period emerged, like this broadcast from 1966 telling us about a spacewalk.
And that radio command link actually it's a link along that tether line you see there, 25 feet of umbilical cord. That contains the life support system and communications link from the spacecraft life support system out through that chest pack.
I shared that clip without comment. It's just there to emphasize how important it is to believe other truths your government gives you, like the so-called Doomsday Clock that's designed to have us living in fear. Hopefully the threat is just as real as that spacewalk. At any rate, any discussion of the void of space segues naturally into that larger outer darkness all men must face, their own mortality, which leads us into Obituaries. Melanie, the singer who performed at Woodstock and topped the charts with Brand New Key, dies at the age of 76. Melanie, the singer who performed at Woodstock in 1969 and had major pop hits with Brand New Key and Lay Down Candles in the Rain in the early 70s, died Tuesday at age 76. News of the death came from her publicity firm, Glass Onion PR. No information on the cause of death was immediately given. But Melanie, full name Melanie Safka, had been in the studio earlier this month working on a new record of cover songs, Secondhand Smoke, for the Cleopatra label. It would have been her 32nd album, the label said. Her 3 children, Lila, Jordy, and Bo Jared, posted a message on Facebook writing, "We're heartbroken, but want to thank each and every one of you for the affection you have for our mother, and to tell you that she loved all of you so much. She was one of the most talented, strong, and passionate women of the era, and every word she wrote, every note she sang reflected that. Our world is much dimmer, the colors of a dreary, rainy Tennessee pale with her absence today. But we know that she's still here, smiling down on all of us, all of you, from the stars." We'd like to express how much Melanie's music meant to us and wish her family well in these difficult times. As for you, I'd like to thank you for watching my difficult times by viewing this show, or as I like to call it, that suspicious gap in my resume. Thanks, and see you next time. Wait, before you go, I'd like to make you aware of a new enterprise I'm launching. It's called Classic Paranormal. Head over to Apple Podcasts and look it up. It's just me reading older books on the supernatural, psychic researches and investigations that really happened, fascinating stuff that time has forgotten, classic paranormal. Be sure to subscribe to it and enjoy hours of listening pleasure.